They finally stopped lying to themselves and saw the truth. Your silence wasn't heartbreak, it was liberation. You weren't ignoring them because you were wounded, you were ignoring them because they no longer mattered. That realization stung deeper than any insult ever could. They used to believe they were the prize, the treasure, the one who made you. They thought losing them would destroy you. But when you walked away and didn't flinch, they had to face a reality they never prepared for. You were the one holding the value all along. It wasn't that you needed them. You simply cared, and they mistook caring for dependency. They thought you stayed because you couldn't do better. They thought you fought for the connection because they were irreplaceable. Now they understand you were just loyal, not helpless. And people who have never experienced real loyalty always misunderstand it. They confuse love with weakness. They confuse patience with lack of options. But you had options, you just had standards. And when they crossed those standards, you didn't yell, you didn't argue, you left. They swear they never thought you'd actually go. You were the one who always tried, always showed up, always gave them a chance. That alone made them arrogant. They began to assume you would never walk away. They thought you'd always return, regardless of how you were treated. So when the day came that you packed up your silence and disappeared from their world, something inside them shattered. Because in that moment they realized the truth: they were never your lifeline. They were just there until you decided they weren't. They mistook access for importance. They thought proximity meant power. They believed they had influence over your emotions. But the moment they betrayed you and you didn't break, the illusion collapsed like a cheap mirror. They were never the sun in your sky, you were. They always acted like you couldn't leave because you'd lose everything. Now they stare at you from afar, realizing it was the complete opposite. They were the ones who lost everything the moment you walked out without hesitation or drama. They didn't know you could detach with that much calmness. They didn't know you could disappear without leaving behind a crack in your voice or a tear in your eye. They didn't know you could love deeply and still walk away when respect left the room. That is what haunts them. Because anyone can leave, but not everyone can leave with dignity. They thought they could make you chase. They thought they could make you doubt yourself. They thought their absence would hurt you more than your absence could ever hurt them. And now they are learning the hardest truth: your absence was the punishment. They underestimated your emotional discipline. Not everyone can walk away without looking back. Not everyone can shut a door and never reopen it. Not everyone can cut a connection without needing closure. But you could, and that made you terrifying. They blamed you for moving on quickly, but they never acknowledged the real reason you were already gone long before your body left. Your heart had checked out the moment they showed you who they truly were. By the time you walked away, you were already done. They always assumed you'd break if they betrayed you. They thought they had the power to ruin your peace. They thought their actions could shake you to your core. What they failed to see was that betrayal only opened your eyes, it didn't break your spirit. And once your eyes opened, so did your perspective. You started seeing things as they were, not as your heart wanted them to be. Then suddenly, everything made sense. Their behavior, their words, their manipulation, it all revealed itself. And once truth arrives, love leaves. They finally realized the brutal reality. They weren't shit to you, not because you lacked emotion, but because they lacked basic respect. You don't hold on to people who treat you like you're disposable. You walk away. And that's exactly what you did. They replay the past now, trying to find where they lost their grip. But the truth is simple: they never had a grip. They had your kindness, not your dependence. They had your time, not your ownership. They had access, not control. And they miss that access more than anything. They don't miss being with you, they miss being able to affect you. They hate that your emotions are no longer tied to their actions. They hate that their presence doesn't shake you, and their absence doesn't break you. They never thought you'd become the person who could shut down feelings like a switch. But that's the funny thing about betrayal: it hardens the soft-hearted in ways people cannot undo. The same people who taught you pain now fear the version of you that healed from it. Their ego convinced them that losing them would be your downfall. Now, ironically, the silence they created became their downfall instead. You didn't crumble. You didn't chase. You didn't explain. You simply evolved. Some people learn from losing you. Others never recover. They fall apart because they've never met someone who could love them fully and still walk away completely. You were the first, and the scar of that truth is something they now wear in private. They thought they were unforgettable. Now they realize it was you who was unforgettable. Not because you begged, but because you didn't. And that kind of strength eats at their insecurities more than any revenge ever could. Now their memories torture them more than your silence. They sit with the regret they crafted with their own hands. They finally understand the truth. You were never desperate for them. They were the ones desperate for someone like you. They hate that they finally understand you never begged for space in their life. You weren't trying to prove your worth to them. They were the ones who should have proven theirs to you. But arrogance blinded them, and clarity came only after you vanished. They replay their own behavior now, and the truth is brutal. They weren't special, they were just entertained. You were giving everything while they gave the bare minimum, thinking it was enough. But now they see how embarrassing that was in hindsight. They assumed you stayed because you couldn't leave, but you stayed because you believed in what you felt. Loyalty is not desperation, but desperate people can't tell the difference. They judged you from their own limited emotional vocabulary. They look back now and realize they never actually impressed you. You tolerated them. You were patient with them. You carried the connection on your shoulders while they dragged their feet. And when you finally dropped the weight, they collapsed under what was left. Their pride never expected consequences. They thought there would always be another round, another conversation, another chance to fix things. But when people see you as endless, they forget you can be final. And you were. They hate how calm you are now. No rage, no revenge, no pleas, just quiet indifference. And nothing terrifies a guilty person more than being erased by someone they once took for granted. Your peace is humiliating to them. They never understood that your withdrawal wasn't emotional immaturity, it was emotional maturity. You don't fight for seats at tables where you're disrespected. You walk away and build your own table, and then you decide who gets to sit. They scroll through your life now, realizing you look better without them in it. Your glow improved, your energy upgraded, your smile sharpened. And the irony is that while they thought you needed their presence, it turns out you flourished in their absence. They can't explain to anyone why you aren't angry, because they've never seen someone love without attachment and leave without collapse. People like them only understand heartbreak when it screams. Yours stayed silent, and silence became your sharpest blade. Now they're learning the final lesson. Once someone teaches you how they treat love, your heart adjusts accordingly. You didn't become cold overnight. You became observant. And once you saw the pattern, you stopped participating in the game. They never imagined that the person who once chose them every single day would suddenly choose themselves instead. But that's what growth is, realizing that not everyone deserves access to you, and some people never deserved it in the first place. They thought they were irreplaceable until they realized they were already replaced, not by another person, but by peace. Nothing hurts the arrogant more than knowing serenity took their spot, and they can't compete with that. Now they live with the quiet fear that someone else is getting the version of you they never earned. Someone else is getting the loyalty they wasted. Someone else is benefiting from the healed, upgraded you. And they know they don't get a second chance. But here's the funniest part: they didn't lose you because you stopped loving. They lost you because you finally loved yourself more. And that is the kind of ending people who take advantage never see coming. So now they sit in the wreckage of their own ego, finally understanding that they were never the sun in your galaxy. They were just another planet orbiting something brighter, and they mistook your gravity for addiction. And that is the conclusion of your story with them. They weren't shit to you. You were never desperate for them. They lost access, not because you changed, but because you finally realized what you deserved, and they were nowhere near it. They're shocked that you saw their betrayal long before they even had the courage to commit it. While they were sharpening their knives in the dark, you were already 3 chapters ahead, watching them tiptoe through a script you memorized years ago. They thought they were clever. They thought they were unpredictable. They forgot you've danced with demons before they ever learned how to crawl. They can't process the fact that you didn't fall for the sweet phase, the charming phase, the I would never hurt you act. Because you'd seen that movie too many times, same smiles, same false promises, same sudden change of tone once they thought you were trapped. They were performing, but you were analyzing. They thought you were naive because you didn't say anything. They mistook silence for blindness. But silence was observation. Stillness was gathering information. They never realized you were letting them expose themselves without interruption. They were shocked that every manipulation they attempted was one you had already predicted almost to the word. They accused you, you stayed calm. They guilt-tripped you, you stayed silent. They switched to emotional blackmail, you didn't flinch. They tried kindness again, and you didn't melt. They had never met someone immune to their weaponry. They thought they could confuse you with mixed signals, inconsistency, and emotional fireworks. But you had already figured out their operating system, their patterns, their triggers, their defaults, the way they collapse under accountability. You didn't need time to understand them. They were already a blueprint you've mastered from people like them before. That's what terrified them, that you weren't learning them in real time. You already knew them before they began. They were predictable, mechanical, textbook. And nothing bruises the ego more than realizing they worked so hard to be special, only to be categorized as standard. They threw their usual tactics at you: triangulation, jealousy games, strategic silence, ego baiting, guilt traps. And none of it worked. They kept thinking, why aren't they reacting? Because they never understood that someone who knows the rules of the game doesn't get shaken by the game. They thought they were testing your loyalty. They didn't know you were testing their character. And while they thought they were pulling strings, you were gathering proof quietly, calmly, waiting until the evidence spoke louder than your words ever could. When you finally walked away, they weren't hurt by the departure. They were hurt by the realization that you saw everything from start to finish and still played along without exposing them. That level of control, that level of emotional discipline, it's terrifying. They expected you to be shocked when they switched on you. They expected tears, anger, outrage. But you just blinked, almost bored, because you had calculated it all before they even made the decision. You didn't need to be surprised. They were just proving what you already knew. They didn't know they were following a roadmap you'd memorized from past villains. Same ego, same insecurities, same hunger for control dressed up as love. You'd already graduated from that class. They were still reciting the first chapter. They feel exposed now, vulnerable, naked, because the hardest truth hit them. The entire time they thought they were playing you, they were revealing themselves. They tell people you became cold. In truth, you just never let emotions cloud your judgment. You watched with a calm smile, waiting to see how low they would go this time. And when they finally hit the predictable button betrayal, you quietly took the exit you had prepared weeks ago. They wanted the upper hand. They ended up performing in front of a master who could read souls like open books. People hate that kind of intelligence. It feels supernatural, demonic, unsettling. They can't comprehend how you predict them without guessing. They thought only they had hidden motives. They didn't realize you had sharper ones. Your strategy wasn't revenge, it was awareness. Revenge requires emotion. Awareness is cold, clean, and final. Their ego is shattered because they never shocked you. They never surprised you. They were never the plot twist. They were just another paragraph in a long story of humans who think they're smarter than the person watching quietly. And now they're scared. Not because you left, but because they realize you could have destroyed them at any moment, and you chose not to. Mercy from someone dangerous is far scarier than retaliation from someone emotional. They wanted control and lost it. They wanted to manipulate and expose themselves. They wanted to outsmart you and instead learned that you'd already solved them like a puzzle before they even spoke their lines. Now they live with the most painful realization of all. You didn't lose them. You never needed them. You just studied them, understood them, and left the moment the prediction matched the performance. And that psychological power? That terrifies them more than any revenge ever could. Once they realized you were steps ahead, their mind began racing. They rechecked their own messages, their own tone, their own actions. They wondered how early you figured them out. They wondered what gave them away. They wondered why you didn't confront them, fight them, or react the way others had. That's when fear began to settle in, because nothing is scarier to a manipulator than someone who already knows the rules but refuses to play. They didn't understand that when you've healed, you develop a sixth sense. You don't wait to get hurt to recognize red flags. You see them in the foundation, in the first cracks, in the smallest shifts. Healing gives clarity. Clarity gives foresight. And foresight prevents disaster before it has the chance to destroy. You weren't cold because you stopped caring. You were quiet because you stopped entertaining their performance. They came prepared with a script full of drama, excuses, and justifications. But you refused to audition. You let the story end as soon as their patterns began to surface, and that destroyed the illusion they needed in order to feel superior. They always believed they had psychological advantage until they realized you had emotional discipline. You can't be controlled by someone who has no influence over your inner state. That is what truly terrified them. They could hurt your feelings, but they couldn't disturb your peace. They could betray you, but they couldn't break you. Their power stopped where your self-control began. They thought silence meant confusion, but silence actually meant you were thinking. You were observing in a way that didn't flatter their ego. You were processing without reaction, and that kind of emotional presence can dismantle a manipulator from the inside. People like them want chaos, they need emotional explosion. When they don't get it, they crumble. Eventually, they began to expose themselves completely, unraveling with every move. It's funny how people reveal the most when they think no one is paying attention. Their deceit grew more obvious, their shifts more dramatic, their inconsistencies louder. And through it all, you simply remained still. You didn't need to dig, search, accuse, or chase. The truth came to you effortlessly. They never expected someone who could sense the betrayal before it materialized. They couldn't accept that their actions might be predictable, ordinary, or cliché. They wanted to be perceived as complex, misunderstood, the kind who nobody else ever figured out. But you weren't impressed. You recognized the tired patterns of someone who still hasn't learned how to be genuine. You had seen this story before, in different faces, in different environments, in different relationships. That's what made it easy to detach. You weren't losing something new, you were walking away from something already familiar, something you had outgrown long ago. They thought they were reinventing the game. You had already retired from it. And in the end, the worst thing for them wasn't that you walked away, it was that you walked away without needing closure. Closure is what they counted on. Closure is where they believe they regain control, where they can rewrite the narrative, gaslight, twist facts, or regain emotional ground. But you denied them that battlefield. You left quietly, cleanly, without hesitation. They wanted you to come back and plead. They wanted you shaken. They wanted their betrayal to matter in a way that benefited their ego. But betrayal only hurts when you don't see it coming. And you did. You saw the shift the moment it began. You just chose not to fight for what was already dead. The most painful realization for them was that you never lost your footing. They thought they'd knock you off balance, but instead, all they succeeded in doing was revealing their own immaturity. When the dust settled, your peace remained intact while their illusion fell apart. That is why they couldn't process your calmness. It reflected everything they failed to become. They truly believed you were one of those people who kept giving chances, no matter how many times they disrespected you. They thought kindness meant weakness, softness meant defeat, and your silence meant you would never strike back. They didn't understand that you only gave what you received, that you mirrored the energy placed in front of you. They started the fire and then panicked when you stopped shielding them from the flames. They didn't realize you weren't the type to beg, argue, or explain yourself repeatedly. You weren't the one who would chase them for clarity or validation. If they changed their energy, you changed yours. If they played stupid, you played colder. They never expected someone who could withdraw emotionally without hesitation and without needing to announce it. At first, you gave them everything: support, loyalty, patience, compassion. You showed them what it felt like to be valued. They were spoiled by your consistency. They took your good heart and assumed you'd tolerate anything. They assumed the angel you were would always act like an angel. They forgot even angels carry swords. When they did you wrong, they fully expected a meltdown, a reaction, a breakdown. They thought you would plead for them to stop, for them to fix things. They thought they had that kind of power over you. Instead, you shifted into a version they didn't even know existed. You matched their disrespect with distance. You matched their coldness with silence. You didn't need to yell. Your lack of interest was loud enough. You didn't need revenge that involved chaos or destruction. The greatest revenge was showing them that losing you didn't shake your world, but it shattered theirs. They didn't think you were capable of emotional indifference until they met that side of you face to face. At first, they laughed at your loyalty. They mistook it for naivety, but later they missed that loyalty like oxygen. Suddenly, your energy shift became a mirror they couldn't escape. They didn't see a monster, you just gave them a taste of their own reflection, raw and unfiltered. They didn't understand that when you're done, you don't announce it, you don't warn them, you don't send a speech, you simply stop giving the type of love you used to provide. And that's when they realized the difference between apologies and accountability. They weren't sorry, they were scared. They were shocked that the same person who once checked on them now ignored texts. The same person who listened to their problems now didn't care to ask. The same person who stayed up comforting them could now sleep peacefully while they struggled. It wasn't cruelty, it was reciprocity. They wanted you to play fair, even though they never did. They wanted you to stay angelic, even when they treated you like a villain. But energy doesn't lie. You just learned to stop lighting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You just stopped watering a garden that never grew anything but weeds. They thought you wouldn't have the strength to pull away. They thought you were emotionally dependent, attached, or too invested to create distance. They didn't expect you to realize your own worth mid-story. They didn't think you would upgrade the character you played in their life. They didn't think you'd stop explaining yourself. But one day you did. You realized that someone who understands you doesn't need explanations, and someone who doesn't understand you won't ever accept them. That's when emotional freedom kicked in. They never imagined that the person who once gave so much would start giving absolutely nothing. Silence became your language. Detachment became your armor. Self-respect became your response. And that terrified them in ways anger never could. They weren't prepared for someone who would switch sides without guilt. They didn't know you could go from open-hearted to ice-cold. They never imagined the switch was already installed, it just hadn't been used yet. They played games thinking you would keep trying to win. But you weren't playing to win, you were playing to match the rules they set. And when they broke respect, you broke connection. When they switched energy, you switched presence. They wanted war, but weren't ready for someone who fought by disappearing. They were used to drama, screaming, and emotional scenes. They weren't ready for someone who destroyed them by denying them access. You made their ego starve. They didn't realize that your kindness was a choice, not a default setting. When you withdrew it, they understood how valuable it was. They finally realized they never deserved your softness, they were simply allowed to experience it. You didn't become heartless, you just stopped offering your heart to the wrong people. You didn't become cold, you just learned how to control the temperature of your soul. And once that transformation happens, there is no going back. They tried to pretend nothing had changed, but you could feel everything had. You no longer spoke with emotion, you spoke with clarity. You no longer acted from pain, you acted from understanding. And they had no defense against that kind of growth. It scared them that you weren't trying to hurt them, you were simply done being hurt by them. You didn't want revenge, you wanted closure. And closure came not from angry conversations, but from finally recognizing your own value. What shocked them most was that you never raised your voice. You became calm. Not weak calm, dangerous calm. Calm that holds power. Calm that shows someone you've already decided how this ends. Meanwhile, their reaction exposed them. They panicked. They got emotional. They tried to pull you back into old dynamics. They tried to bait you into responses that validated their relevance. But when you're truly done, nothing pulls you back. They wanted to get a reaction out of you. Instead, they encountered someone who had evolved past the version of themselves they used to manipulate. You became untouchable not because they couldn't reach you, but because they no longer mattered enough to affect you. They finally understood that your worst wasn't yelling, arguing, or fighting. Your worst was indifference. The version of you they received was the one they created. They didn't like the reflection, but they were the artist. They thought they could break you by betraying you. Instead, they broke the version of you that tolerated them. They destroyed the old version of you and built a new one that no longer needed them. They never stopped to think that you were watching everything, the patterns, the switches in tone, the sudden mood changes, the selective affection. They didn't know you already understood their game before they even played the first move. So when you finally shifted your energy, it wasn't impulsive, it was calculated. It was the kind of silence that comes only from clarity. They wanted to manipulate you emotionally, but they forgot you had mastered emotional intelligence through experience. You didn't react, not because you didn't feel anything, but because you already knew the outcome, and that terrified them. A person who doesn't need to respond is a person who can't be controlled. They couldn't understand how you could see their betrayal and still act calm, composed, and unbothered. They expected chaos, breakdowns, or pleading. Instead, you treated it like a business decision: data received, reality accepted, response adjusted. That level of emotional maturity was something they never saw coming. They kept trying to trigger you, push you, and provoke a reaction that would validate their importance, but you didn't give them that satisfaction. You didn't need validation. You didn't need closure from the person who caused the damage. You found closure on your own, and that was the one outcome they never prepared for. Every time they tried to guilt trip you, you stayed silent. Every time they tried to play victim, you remained distant. They were confused people, like them only win when you play the game. You stopped playing. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was checkmate. They didn't realize that your absence was a response. You didn't block them emotionally, they blocked themselves when they chose betrayal. And by the time they understood what they lost, your heart had already relocated to a new season of your life where they were no longer welcome. Your lack of anger made them uncomfortable. It forced them to confront the truth: they were the problem. As long as you were reacting emotionally, they could pretend both sides were at fault. But when you stopped reacting, they had to face their own reflection in the mirror of your silence. You learn that the same people who act like they don't care will suddenly care the moment you stop caring. That was the real shift, the moment their power disappeared. Because the version of you they once controlled no longer existed, they had turned you into someone they didn't know how to handle. They watched you detach with grace, dignity, and composure. Not a scene, not a messy ending, not a dramatic performance. You walked away the way legends are supposed to, a silent exit that says more than 1,000 arguments. They didn't expect that level of self-respect. They finally realized something. You were never desperate for them, they were simply the ones you chose. And when that choice expired, your emotional investment expired with it. Nothing about you remained stuck. You healed forward, while they stayed behind, replaying old moments you no longer cared about. There comes a point in life where trying again is no longer noble, it's self-betrayal. You learned that the hard way. You gave chances, you gave patience, you gave understanding, and none of it changed the ending. So now the story has a period, not a comma. There is no sequel, no reconciliation, no part 2. When you close a chapter, it stays shut. Because people thought maybe meant there was still time. They thought someday meant they still existed in the future you were building. They thought we can fix this was your default response. They didn't realize those words expired the moment you learned to choose yourself. You stopped living in emotional installments. You collected what dignity remained and walked forward without looking back. You're not heartless, you just stopped bleeding for people who never deserved your wounds in the first place. Everyone wants forgiveness until they realize forgiveness doesn't come with access. You forgave, yes, but you also removed the entry card. That's the part they didn't expect. People confuse silence with softness, but silence is the sharpest ending. When you gave no explanation, no fight, no emotional performance, they panicked. Because once you stop arguing, it means the decision has already been made inside you. People aren't scared of anger, they're terrified of peace. You realize that going back would only reopen old pain. What's the point of stitching a wound just to hand someone the needle again? You would rather walk with a scar that healed than re-enter a battlefield you already survived. Growth means refusing to revisit what almost destroyed you. Sometimes they don't understand because they believe you owe them closure. But closure doesn't come from a conversation, it comes from a decision. You gave yourself closure when you chose not to return. They don't get to co-sign your healing. That phase of your life was signed off without their approval. People always assume the door stays open for them, especially when they took you for granted. They assume they can leave, disrespect, break trust, wander, and return whenever they feel like it. But life isn't a revolving door. You realize that you are a destination, not an airport runway for temporary landings. The version of you that would have considered a second chance doesn't exist anymore. Growth changed you. Pain matured you. Betrayal sculpted you. You outgrew the idea of begging someone to treat you right. Once you learn your worth, your standards become non-negotiable. When you turned your back and never returned, it sent a louder message than words ever could. They finally understood that silence is not empty, it's full of the truth you no longer cared to explain. They were suddenly forced to face what they did without the distraction of your presence. They will replay old conversations in their head. They will wonder when exactly you detached. But detachment doesn't happen on the last day. It happens silently, slowly, long before you walk out the door. By the time you physically left, emotionally you were already gone. People who lose you never realize it at the moment they do. They realize later when the calls don't go through, the messages stay unread, and the familiar version of you doesn't exist anymore. That is the real heartbreak, not losing someone, but losing access to someone who once cared deeply. You became the lesson, not the return. You became the memory that teaches them not to push people too far. And there is power in that. Your absence becomes your revenge. Your silence becomes your justice. Your peace becomes the punishment they never expected. They thought time heals everything, but time doesn't reopen doors. Time shows you why those doors needed to close. The longer you stayed away, the clearer everything became. Distance is a mirror, and in that reflection you saw who they truly were, not who you wanted them to be. People think strength is holding on, but sometimes real strength is walking away and never checking if they followed. That's the kind of strength you built. You stopped breaking yourself to keep others comfortable. You chose your sanity over their chaos, and the world changed when you did. Your heart stopped being a doormat for recurring guests. You turned it into a boundary. Once the door shuts, it's not locked out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. Not everyone deserves a second entrance. You also learn that not every relationship deserves a comeback arc. Some are meant to end. Some people are meant to be chapters, not the whole book. You stop trying to force supporting characters into lead roles. Their part in your story ended, and that's perfectly fine. They may come back with apologies, new stories, new promises, new regrets. But I'm sorry doesn't restore what trust destroyed. Sorry doesn't unbreak what they shattered. Sorry is not a time machine. They should have thought before the damage was done. When you walked away, you took your love, loyalty, compassion, and patience with you. Now, someone else will receive what they mishandled. Someone else will get the version of you they failed to protect, and that is a consequence they will have to live with. They lost the privilege of experiencing your growth firsthand. You won't return just to show them how strong you've become. Your healing is not a performance. You don't owe anyone a front row seat to your comeback, especially those who cheered when you were low. You realize that some endings are not tragedies, they are liberation. Closing the door didn't hurt you. Staying would have. You chose freedom over familiarity, peace over history, self-worth over emotional recycling. That's evolution. People who break something inside you don't get to complain about who you become after. They don't get to be surprised when the access ends, the doors shut, and the chapters close. Actions have consequences, and losing you was theirs. Even if they say, "We can fix this," you know that going back would be like trying to resurrect something that died for a reason. Love without trust is a body without a heartbeat. Why try to revive something that stopped breathing long ago? And now when they call and get silence, when they reach out and get distance, when they finally understand you're gone for good, they will realize something painful. They weren't just losing the relationship, they were losing the chance to try again. Some people only realize the value of a door once it closes and not a second before. When access was easy, they took it for granted. When your heart was open, they walked through without wiping their feet. But the moment it closed, they realized there was no spare key, no hidden entrance, no back door. You weren't playing hard to get, you were gone. They will tell themselves you're being dramatic, stubborn, cold. But deep inside, they know the truth. You just reached a point of no return. A point where the damage outgrew the investment. A point where it cost more to stay than to leave. And when that moment arrives, even love has to step aside and let self-respect take the wheel. You learn that forgiveness is not the same as access. You can release the anger and still refuse to return to the fire. You can let go of the pain without inviting the same hands that caused it to touch you again. Healing is not an invitation, it's separation. You grow apart from what once wounded you. Some people only change when they lose you, but by then the change doesn't matter anymore. You needed effort then, not after. You needed accountability in the moment, not apologies once the damage became irreversible. Your heart was not a trial version they get to upgrade later. It was the full version from the beginning, they just didn't know how to use it. People assume they'll get closure when they finally realize what they did. But closure doesn't work like that. Closure is what you give yourself when you stop waiting for understanding from someone who never cared to understand in the first place. The closure came when you shut the emotional door, not when they knocked on it again. They think life should give them another chance. They think time owes them a redo. They think the universe should align so they can correct their mistakes. But life doesn't work on their schedule. Sometimes the bridge burns while they're still planning how to cross it, and by the time they return, all that remains is ash and memory. They'll talk to themselves in circles, trying to decode your silence. They'll reread old messages. They'll recall conversations. They'll analyze their behavior and finally see what you saw long before. They weren't ready for someone with your heart, your consistency, your loyalty. And life doesn't hold seats for the unprepared. You used to meet people halfway, then you learned that halfway for others was barely 10% for you. You carried everything: communication, effort, patience, fixing problems they caused. When you stopped carrying it, the entire structure collapsed. And that collapse showed you who was building with you and who was just living in the house. They always thought you'd come back because that's what you used to do. They were banking on your history, not realizing history doesn't repeat once the author rewrites their standards. You taught them a lesson that life eventually teaches everyone. Loyalty is beautiful until it starts killing the person offering it. In the end, what scared them wasn't losing you, it was realizing they were never getting another chance to prove themselves. That door wasn't closed temporarily, it was welded shut. They can stand outside for years offering apologies, regrets, and explanations, but none of it changes the fact that you moved on without them.